They thought the quiet black girl would stay silent, but what she did next shook the whole school system. The morning sun was too bright for a Monday. It painted the sky in a colorless pale blue that made everything feel artificial, like the town had been cleaned and staged before Zara Mitchell ever set foot in it. From the back seat of her mother's aging Honda, she watched the houses pass rows of manicured lawns, identical white fences, and polished SUVs. The neighborhood seemed like it had been copied and pasted from a brochure for a better life, one that didn't include girls like her. Zara's mother said nothing during the drive. She hadn't for months. Their conversations had dwindled to brief instructions and quiet nods, like two people living parallel lives under the same roof. When the car pulled into the circular drive of Meadow Ridge High, Zara stared at the large banner hanging over the front entrance. It read, "Excellence through Community." Her lips pressed into a line. She didn't believe in slogans anymore. Her mother checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, reapplied her lipstick, then muttered something under her breath. Zara thought it might have been, "You'll be fine," but she wasn't sure. There was no hug, no words of encouragement, just a flick of her mother's fingers on the steering wheel, signaling it was time to get out. Zara stepped out without speaking. The door shut behind her with a soft click, sealing the distance between them. For a moment, she just stood there, taking in the unfamiliar world before her. Students streamed into the building in packs, laughing, scrolling on their phones, tossing their backpacks like they owned the place. No one looked at her directly, and yet she could feel it, the sideways glances, the whispers that didn't need words. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, lifted her chin just enough, and walked through the front doors like she belonged there. Like she wasn't terrified. The school smelled clean, not bleach and chemicals like her old school, but citrusy, soft, and carefully curated. The lockers were a glossy two-tone blue, and the floors were so shiny they mirrored the fluorescent ceiling lights above. It was too polished, too perfect, like the school itself had been groomed to reject anything that didn't match its standards. Zara walked the hallways like she was in a maze with everyone else already knowing the way. A tight knot formed in her stomach. Her homeroom teacher, Ms. Fairbanks, greeted her at the classroom door with a smile that was a little too sweet, too rehearsed. "Welcome, Zara. We've heard we've got a strong student joining us," she said, with an emphasis on the word strong that made Zara's skin prickle. She didn't reply, just nodded and found her assigned seat in the back corner. She kept her eyes fixed on the blank notebook on her desk as whispers floated around her. They weren't words she could hear clearly, but she didn't need to. She had felt them before, whispers that crept beneath the surface, quiet and cruel. The first few periods passed in a blur. Teachers droned on about syllabi while classmates gave her fleeting looks, the kind usually reserved for exotic animals in a zoo, curious but wary. Zara didn't flinch. She had trained herself for moments like this, learned to fold her hands in her lap and measure her breathing when the world felt too loud. But the ache in her chest grew heavier as the day wore on. By lunch, it felt like she had walked through a battlefield. The cafeteria buzzed with voices, clusters of friends sharing stories and inside jokes. Zara moved carefully, tray in hand, scanning for an empty seat. She spotted one near the wall and headed toward it, only to have a boy slide into it at the last second. He didn't apologize. Just stared at her, expression unreadable. She moved again. Finally, she found a seat near the exit alone. She ate in silence, not because she wasn't hungry, but because her stomach had twisted itself into knots. It was there, in that quiet corner, that she first saw them. 3 boys who walked like the world owed them something: Nolan Pierce and his 2 shadows, Chase Taylor and Liam Foster. They moved through the cafeteria with ease, heads high, backs straight, scanning the room like predators bored with their prey. When Nolan's eyes landed on her, Zara felt it like a spark against her skin. He nudged Chase, who smirked, and both leaned into Liam like they were sharing a private joke. Zara stared back. Not with fear, not with anger, just blank, unreadable. She'd learned long ago that silence could be a shield. The next day, it started. Someone bumped her shoulder in the hallway, harder than necessary. No apology, just a sneer. Someone else knocked her pencil off her desk. A soft chuckle followed. In the bathroom mirror, she caught girls whispering behind cupped hands. Words like ghetto and attitude floated through the air. Zara said nothing. She sat through it all, hands folded, eyes on the clock. She didn't flinch. She didn't react. But inside, the old rhythm returned, the one her cousin Troy had taught her back in the boxing gym. Roll your shoulders, center your weight, breathe. She had promised herself there would be no fights this time, no detentions, no confrontations. Not again, but something told her it wouldn't be that easy. At Meadow Ridge High, it wasn't just about being new. It was about being different. And in this place of banners and carefully arranged smiles, different meant dangerous. Different meant expendable. Zara didn't plan to fight, but she also didn't plan to break. The first week passed like a slow storm. Nothing loud, nothing explosive, but something in the air was shifting. It was the kind of shift Zara Mitchell knew all too well, the kind that signaled a line being drawn and slowly crossed. On Tuesday morning, someone bumped her shoulder again in the hallway. This time, it was harder. She stumbled, caught herself, and looked around. No apology, just a smirk. A boy walking away with his friends, laughing like it was part of some private game. During third period, a girl accidentally spilled water on Zara's notes. The girl apologized with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Ms. Fairbanks, the homeroom teacher, glanced in their direction but said nothing. She returned to her lecture as if the moment had never happened. Zara stayed still. She kept her breathing even and her eyes forward. She didn't move a muscle. She had learned a long time ago that reacting gave people what they wanted, and she wasn't about to hand anyone that satisfaction, but it kept happening. A knock of her books off the desk in math class, a whisper behind her in chemistry. Snickers when she raised her hand and answered correctly. Must have learned that in hood school, Liam Foster muttered one day after she solved a complex equation on the board. Zara paused only for a second, her pencil mid-stroke. She didn't look back. She just kept writing, letting the steady sound of graphite on paper drown out the chuckles behind her. She had heard worse, much worse. But it wasn't the words that hurt the most. It was the silence that followed. The kind of silence that told her the teacher heard it too, but chose to pretend it didn't happen. That was the part that always cut deepest. By gym class, the tension had thickened. During basketball drills, Liam shoved past her, going for a rebound. His shoulder slammed into hers hard enough to make her stumble. She caught herself on the floor, straightened, and met his eyes. "Watch it," Queen Latifah. He sneered. Zara didn't blink. Her voice was steady and low. That's not even clever. Liam froze. He blinked, unsure. You're not funny, she added, turning away without raising her voice. Just loud. The gym fell quiet for a second. Then someone let out a low, "Ooh!" Even Nolan Pierce, lounging on the bleachers like he was watching a stage play, raised an eyebrow. Zara didn't care about the reaction. She hadn't said it for them. She had said it for herself. That small moment changed something, not in the way she had hoped. The boys didn't back down. They got bolder. The next day, she found her locker stuffed with crumpled paper scraps. Grocery ads, torn notebook pages, receipts. At first it seemed random, just garbage, but as she pulled them out, she saw the words scribbled across the scraps in black marker. Go back. Nobody wants you here. Zara stood there, surrounded by falling bits of paper. Some students walked by and saw it. One girl giggled. Another boy looked away. She gathered the mess in silence, stuffed it deep into her backpack. She didn't say a word. She didn't report it. Not yet. That afternoon, as she stood near the brick columns waiting for the bus, a voice broke through the quiet. Doing all right here? She turned and saw Principal Victor Langley. He stood tall, dressed in a charcoal suit with the sleeves rolled up. His face was calm, his eyes steady. He didn't look like a man who was asking out of obligation. Zara nodded slightly. I'm good. You sure you're not invisible? He asked. I never said I was. He smiled faintly. No, you didn't. But I've seen that look before. What look is that? The one that says, I know exactly how far I can be pushed before someone learns they picked the wrong one. Zara's lips twitched, almost a smile. That's pretty specific. I've been here a while, he replied. And I'm not new either, she said. They stood there for a beat, quiet but connected. If anything crosses the line, Principal Langley said, lowering his voice, and you want it documented, come to me. I'll handle it the right way. What's the right way? The way they don't expect. As the bus pulled up, Zara nodded. Thanks. Any time, Ms. Mitchell. She climbed aboard, dropped into a seat by the window, and let the day settle over her like a weighted blanket. She didn't cry. She didn't fume. But something inside her had shifted. Not fear, not even anger. Something colder, something clearer. They thought they had taken something from her. But they hadn't. Not really. Not yet. And that made them dangerous. Because now they thought there would be no consequence. They were wrong. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of midweek lull where everything felt slow, tired, like even time itself was dragging. The sky outside hung low and grey, pressing down on the school like a heavy curtain. Inside, the hallways were unusually quiet. Students moved through them without energy, heads lowered, footsteps soft. Zara Mitchell felt it the moment she walked in. Not fear exactly. Not dread, but something thick in the air, something you couldn't name but could still feel crawling across your skin. The looks came early that day. Nolan Pierce stood near her locker, leaning like he had nothing better to do. His thumbs tapped casually at his phone, but his eyes flicked up when she passed. Just long enough to let her know she was being watched. Later in third period, Chase Taylor kept turning in his seat, whispering to Liam Foster. They chuckled under their breath, like they already knew what the day was meant to deliver. By fourth period, Zara had started counting the signs, the sudden silences, the forced laughter. The glances that never fully turned into stares, but hovered just on the edge. They were circling her, but still, there were no words. No touches, just tension. That low hum of something about to happen. In sixth period art class, the moment arrived. The teacher, Ms. Carrington, had given the class a creative hour. No structure, no lecture. Just time to explore. Students were scattered across the room, sketching, painting, building collages. The kind of chaos that felt safe to most kids. But not to Zara. She sat near the back, her desk angled slightly toward the window. She wasn't drawing anything real, just moving her pencil across the page, making shapes and motion to keep her hands busy. It was a quiet act of survival. She didn't hear Chase walk up behind her. She didn't see the scissors. Not until it was already done. The whisper of metal. The sharp tug near the back of her scalp. A sound like something delicate being broken. She froze, not from pain, but from instinct. Her hand reached back slowly. Her fingers touched the end of something frayed and wrong. Her braid. Cut. She pulled it forward. It lay heavy in her palm, thick and coiled, no longer connected to her. Behind her, Chase laughed. "Yo, oh my God," he shouted, holding up the severed braid like a trophy. Liam gasped, half laughing, half stunned. "Did you really just dude? That's messed up." Chase grinned, swinging the braid slightly. "I thought she might want to lighten the load. This stuff's heavy, right?" Zara didn't turn around. She stared at the hair in her hand. Not at the braid exactly, but through it, past it, to something far away. Her body was still, too still, the laughter around her suddenly too sharp, too loud. Nolan's voice floated in from the other side of the room. "Damn, I didn't think you'd actually do it. That's bold." The room vibrated with soft gasps, murmurs, whispers wrapping cruelty in the disguise of shock. Zara didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't move. Chase leaned in behind her, voice low and smooth. "Don't take it personal. Just a little joke. You're always so serious. Figured you needed a makeover." That was when she stood up. The scraping of her chair against the floor was loud. Louder than it should have been. It cut through the room like a warning bell. She turned, slowly, deliberately. Her gaze landed on the braid in Chase's hand. He blinked. His grin started to falter. "Relax," he said, his tone suddenly unsure. "It's not like it was real or anything." Zara's voice came quiet and sharp. "You think that makes it better?" Liam stepped forward, trying to take control. "No one's trying to hurt feelings. It's just hair, right?" Nolan, still lounging, crossed his arms. "I mean, you wear it like armor. People are going to test it. That's just how it goes." Zara looked at him now, her expression calm. "You think this is about hair?" Nolan gave a half smirk. "Isn't it?" She took a step forward, then another. The silence in the room grew denser. A thick, heavy blanket wrapped around every student's shoulders. Chase's hand lowered. The braid slipped from his fingers and hit the floor. Ms. Carrington finally looked up from across the room, her face twisted into confusion as she scanned the students, trying to understand what was happening. "Is something going on?" she asked. No one answered. Zara's voice was low but firm. You don't get to touch me. You don't get to take something from me and call it a joke. Chase raised both hands. Okay, just calm down. But she wasn't angry. Not in the way they expected. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. She was standing, solid, unshaken. And that scared them more than anything. She took another step toward him. Chase stepped back. Liam grabbed his arm, whispering, "Dude, let's go. She's freaking out." Nolan didn't move. His arms stayed crossed, but his eyes had changed. No more amusement, only something like fear. Miss Carrington finally moved toward the intercom. "We need assistance in room 316 now." "Security, please." Zara picked up the braid from the floor, held it in her hand like something sacred, then walked toward the door. She didn't run, she didn't speak, she just walked. Behind her, the classroom erupted. Students shouting, chairs scraping, paint jars tipping. She didn't hear any of it. She walked into the hallway, calm as the ticking of a clock. And she waited, not for apology, not for revenge. She waited because she knew what would come next, and she wanted them to see that she wasn't broken. Not yet. Not even close. The hallway was quiet when Zara stepped out of the classroom. The kind of quiet that follows the eye of a storm, not the end of one. Her footsteps echoed softly against the linoleum floor, steady and even. In her hand, the braid hung like a symbol of everything they thought they could take from her. She stood near the stairwell, not hiding, not running. Waiting. When the assistant principal turned the corner, with 2 campus officers in tow, they shouted for her to stop. Zara didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't resist. She simply stood with the braid in her hand and her shoulders square. They approached quickly, their voices sharp and commanding, hands hovering near their belts, unsure of what they were walking into. But Zara didn't flinch. When they reached her, she let them guide her without a word. She walked beside them, not behind, her head held high. Every step was a choice. By the time they reached the front office, the news had already spread. Students lined the halls, pretending to check posters or adjust their bags, but everyone was listening. One whispered her name. Another muttered, "She snapped." A third voice said quietly, "They cut her hair." That last line moved like a wave through the crowd. Not everyone understood what it meant, but those who did felt it like a bruise forming beneath the skin. Inside the office, Principal Victor Langley stood waiting. He didn't look surprised. He dismissed the officers with a nod. "She's not going anywhere. You can close the door." The door clicked softly behind them. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Zara." She did. Her body rigid, her fingers still curled tightly around the severed braid. She hadn't let it go. The room was quiet. The hum of the vent was the only sound between them. Langley leaned forward, elbows on the desk, his voice low. "I read the report from Miss Carrington," he said. "You attacked 3 students. One's got a broken nose. Another is on his way for X-rays." Zara didn't answer. Her eyes dropped to the floor, not in guilt, but in thought. She was bracing herself for what always came next. "Let me ask you again," Langley continued. "Why?" Her voice, when it came, was soft, tired. "They cut my hair." He nodded, not in shock, not in judgment, but in confirmation, like he had already suspected it. Still, he let the silence sit between them, a moment longer. "I figured that's what it was," he said. "I watched the hallway feed after you walked out. You didn't run, you didn't resist. You waited." Zara's eyes lifted slightly. This wasn't what she expected, not from a man behind a desk, not from an administrator with neatly pressed sleeves and polished shoes. "Most people," he said, "when they hear a black girl fought 3 white boys, they think one thing. They think anger, violence, threat." "I know," she said. "They always do. But when I hear it," he said, "I ask a different question. I ask what happened before the fight. What didn't get recorded? What got ignored? And most of the time, no one wants those answers." Zara sat up straighter. Still holding the braid, her hand slowly opened, revealing the frayed edge. "I didn't want to fight," she said. "I just wanted to get through the day. Go home, breathe." "Then why didn't you walk away?" Langley asked. Her eyes met his now, dry but fierce. "Because I've walked away 100 times. I've ignored the comments, the looks, the little shoves. I stayed quiet and still, and all it did was make them push harder, laugh louder, get braver. And then they took this." Langley stared at the braid, his face unreadable. "It wasn't just hair," she said. "No," he agreed quietly. "It never is." He leaned back in his chair, his breath slow, like he was carrying more than the moment in front of him. "My grandmother used to braid my cousin's hair every Sunday," he said. "Said it was part of her crown. Said the world would try to take it off her head one way or another. Through rules, through jokes, through silence. But if you knew what it meant, no one could take it without a fight." Zara didn't smile, but something in her shoulders loosened. "I have to suspend you," he said finally. 3 days out of school. "I figured. But I'm not expelling you." She looked at him, surprised. "They're going to push for it," he said. "Parents, board members, probably the district. They're going to say you're a threat, that you need to be removed." Zara's lips pressed into a flat line. She'd heard it before. "And when they do," Langley continued, "I'm going to request the footage from inside the classroom. I'm going to file my own report. I'm going to ask the questions they don't want answered." Zara watched him carefully. "Why?" He held her gaze. "I've spent my whole life walking the line between doing the job they gave me and doing the job that matters. And today, I decided those two don't have to be different anymore." He reached into his drawer, pulled out a plain manila envelope, and slid it across the desk. "Inside is your suspension paperwork. You'll sign it." "I'll file it. You'll go home." She took the envelope but didn't open it. "That's not the end of this," he said. "You understand me?" She nodded. "You've been fighting alone since the first day you walked in here?" he said. "You don't have to anymore." Her grip on the braid loosened just slightly, as if some part of her was starting to believe him, and for the first time since she entered the room, her voice carried something different, something that almost sounded like hope. "Okay." Zara Mitchell walked back into Meadow Ridge High on the 4th morning after her suspension. She didn't expect applause, she didn't expect support, and she certainly didn't expect anyone to have changed. But something in the air felt different. The whispers followed her down the hall like smoke. Some students turned to watch her pass, others pretended not to notice. Teachers avoided her gaze. No one said anything, but the silence had shifted. It was no longer indifference. It was unease. She made it through the day with her head high and her mouth shut. She knew better than to expect fairness. She didn't come back to be forgiven. She came back to remember. That afternoon, a quiet message found its way to her through a guidance counselor. Principal Langley would like to see you when you're free. His office looked the same as before. Stacks of paper on the desk, framed photos on the shelf, blinds half closed against the afternoon sun. But the man behind the desk looked slightly more worn, less like an administrator, more like someone who had stayed up reading every line of every complaint that had ever gone ignored. "You okay walking in here?" he asked without looking up. Zara shrugged. "I'm used to people watching me." Langley nodded. "Good." "Because they still are." He motioned for her to sit, then placed a manila folder on the desk. Inside were still images printed from security footage. One showed Chase standing behind her. Another, clearer, caught the glint of scissors midair. "I've sent this to the superintendent," he said, "and I'm drafting a report to submit to the state." Zara's eyes narrowed. "Will they listen?" Langley tapped the folder lightly. "They might, but this alone won't be enough. They'll say it's an isolated incident. They always do." She leaned forward. "So what do we do?" He opened a drawer and pulled out a plain spiral notebook. It wasn't fancy. The kind they gave out during staff trainings, the kind you forgot at the bottom of a bag. "I want you to watch," he said carefully. "If you see something, write it down. Names, times." What was said? Who looked away? Zara hesitated. "You want me to spy on people?" "No," Langley said, his voice steady. "I want you to document what they won't admit. I want you to make it undeniable." She stared at the notebook. "You think they're still coming for me?" "I know they are," he said. "But not the same way. They're going to use policy now, dress code violations." "Language? Anything they can twist." Zara exhaled slowly. "So I'm bait." "No," he said, firm and calm. "Your leverage." Their eyes met. "You were underestimated," he continued. "That was their first mistake. Their second was assuming you were alone." Zara sat back, letting the notebook rest on her lap. "And if I do this, and it still doesn't change anything?" "Then we make it louder," he said. "But first, we make it real." She didn't answer right away. She looked down at the notebook again. Plain white cover, thin blue lines. The kind of tool that had always felt too small to matter. But maybe it wasn't. She nodded once. Just slightly, and that was how it began. Not with another fight. Not with a protest sign, but with a quiet notebook tucked between the pages of a backpack, hidden like a weapon with the safety still on. Over the next few weeks, Zara watched. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She didn't respond to the whispers or the half-laughs in the hallway. But she saw them. She recorded them. At 10:14 a.m., a Latina student shoved near the lockers by a boy twice her size. She raised her voice to defend herself. The teacher arrived just in time to scold her and walk away. Zara wrote it down. Time, names, what was said. What wasn't. In the lunchroom, she began mapping the blind spots, where the cameras were. What they could and couldn't see. She noted the angles, the dead zones. She marked who sat where. Who watched her, who flinched when she walked by. Kyle had returned to school, arms still in a brace. His swagger had dulled. He didn't speak to her. He didn't have to. The silence he carried was enough. Brandon was gone for now. His name floated in conversations, but never landed. Nolan watched from a distance. He didn't smirk anymore. He measured her with a different kind of attention. Not curious, not cruel, just wary. Zara never reacted. She wrote. In the quiet hours of the evening, Principal Langley kept moving too. His days had grown longer, his meetings more frequent. He spoke softly, but with urgency now. He emailed the district, documented everything, kept the pressure quiet, but steady. One evening, after the building had mostly emptied, he called her back to his office. The sun was setting through the blinds. The light hit the floor in soft amber strips. His voice was calm but tight. Lock the door. She didn't ask why. She did as he said. On his desk sat a folder. Someone sent this to me anonymously, he said. Forwarded from a teacher account. Zara opened it and scanned the contents. It was a chain of internal emails. Teachers. Talking about students. Recurring discipline problems, one line read, often from less structured households. Another referenced outside cultural influences. No names were used, but the message was clear. They're building a case, she said quietly. Langley nodded. Not just against you, against anything that threatens the version of order they're comfortable with. Even if it's the truth. Zara clenched her jaw. So what now? Langley looked her in the eye. Now we watch for fractures. And when they start to split, we drive the wedge. Zara Mitchell learned quickly that watching was not passive. It took strength to keep quiet when everything in you demanded to speak. It took control to sit still when your name echoed behind your back, carved into the corners of laughter. So, she watched. The notebook stayed in the bottom of her bag, buried beneath textbooks and folders. She didn't write during class. She didn't flip it open in front of anyone, but every day when she got home, she filled a page. Then another. Then another. It started again in the lunchroom. Of course it did. The cafeteria was a stage where teachers watched trays and not faces, where noise was mistaken for normal. She sat in her usual spot, near the window, half in shadow, alone. By choice. It began with a grape, rolled across the table from the northwest side. 11:38 a.m. she didn't move, then a napkin. Crumpled, tossed lazily by Liam Foster, 11:40 a.m., followed by a soft snicker and a muttered line too quiet to catch. At 11:42, Chase Taylor mimicked her posture. Chin raised, back straight. He whispered something to Liam, who laughed too quickly, too loud. They were baiting her. She did not respond. At 11:44, a plastic fork landed on her tray. "Why don't you smile?" Nolan Pierce said from across the room. His voice was casual, just loud enough to be heard, just soft enough to be deniable. That was when Zara looked up, her gaze locked with Nolan's. She didn't glare. She didn't flinch. She simply looked at him like he was smaller than he thought. He blinked first. Coughed, turned away. Zara stood, picked up her tray, and walked past their table. Calm, measured, as if she didn't carry the heat of humiliation in her chest like a coal. Kyle, quieter now with his arms still wrapped, muttered, "Crazy witch." She kept walking. At the front office, the secretary told her Principal Langley was in a meeting. "I'll wait," she said. She stood in silence, near the glass case of trophies. She didn't shift, didn't scroll her phone. She waited like someone who had earned the right to be heard. 15 minutes later, Langley stepped out, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbows. When he saw her, he raised an eyebrow. "You all right?" "Now I am," she said. In his office, she placed the notebook on his desk, opened it to the latest page. Dates, times, names. Descriptions. Everything precise. "They're starting again," she said. Langley scanned the page. "Anyone else see it?" She nodded. "A few students. One teacher, but she was on her phone." He paused when he reached a small note in the corner of the page. "Camera location, northeast corner. Diagonal line blocked by a pillar, unless seated." He looked up. "You mapped the blind spots? You told me to make it undeniable." He nodded, slowly. "You've been listening." "They don't think anyone's watching," she said. "They think no one cares." "Most people don't," Langley replied. "Not until it touches them." He pulled out his phone and typed a message. "I'll request the lunchroom footage from IT before they can edit anything, but we'll need statements, witnesses." "They won't speak," she said. "Not unless someone goes first." "You volunteering?" She met his eyes. "I'll go first." He didn't smile. He just nodded. Like a soldier recognizing another. They spent the next hour drafting the report together. Her notes became testimony. His fingers moved across the keyboard with a calm urgency. When they were done, he leaned back. "They're not going to like this." "I'm not trying to be liked," Zara said. "You're trying to be heard." She nodded. "Then it's time we give you a microphone." Word traveled fast, not through gossip, but through posture. People noticed how Zara moved differently. Not louder, not meaner. Just firmer, like she belonged in places they once hoped she would avoid. In the second week, it happened again. A girl, younger, smaller, Latina, pushed in the hallway by a boy who laughed too hard. When she raised her voice, a teacher turned the corner, saw only the aftermath, and scolded her for being disruptive. Zara didn't intervene, but she wrote it down. In the staff lounge, a young teacher, Miss Adler, asked a question during a meeting. Why had no students been interviewed before the district made its statement? No one answered her. The next day, her name was removed from a committee she had served on all year. Zara wrote that down too. The system didn't crack loudly. It buckled slowly. Students began to notice where Zara sat. Some avoided her. Others glanced her way, unsure what they were supposed to feel. But there were a few who nodded as they passed. Small gestures. Not friendship, recognition. Nolan Pierce no longer smirked. His eyes followed her, but not with the same ease. He had lost something he couldn't name. Chase kept his distance. So did Liam. They didn't speak to her anymore, but she felt the message in their silence. They still believed this would blow over. They didn't realize they were already inside the storm. It began, as most reckonings do, not with a shout, but with a whisper. A single phone call, a question asked by the right person at the right time. Naomi Grant, a local journalist who had spent years covering school board politics and education equity, heard from a teacher friend that something unusual was happening at Meadow Ridge High. Not a fight, not a scandal, but something quieter, harder to define. She started making calls, one to Principal Victor Langley, one to the district's public affairs office, one to a student who preferred not to be named, and then Finally, one to Zara Mitchell. Zara did not want to talk at first. She had spent so long being watched without her permission that the idea of being recorded, even for the truth, felt intrusive. But Naomi didn't push. She just asked, "If you could say one thing, what would it be?" Zara thought about that for a long time. Then she said, "I want the truth to stop being quiet." The interview was recorded in the school's media room after hours. One camera, no lighting crew. No makeup, just Zara, seated in a plain chair, her hands folded on her lap. She didn't talk about the fight. She talked about the hallway. She talked about the laughter behind her back and the teacher who looked away. She talked about the bathroom stall where she sat holding the severed braid in her hands and how the silence afterward felt louder than the act itself. Naomi asked only a few questions. Most of the time, she just let Zara speak. The interview wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic, it was real. It went live that Saturday evening on a quiet corner of the outlet's website. Not many people saw it at first, but those who did shared it. And those who shared it had stories of their own. By Monday, emails began arriving at the school. Not complaints, not threats. Questions. Was it true? Had there been other reports? Who was protecting the students? Principal Langley stood at his desk reading the fifth email of the morning when his office phone rang. A board member. Concerned, curious, careful with their words. "We're not looking to place blame," they said. Langley responded calmly. "Then you're not looking hard enough." By midday, a former teacher commented anonymously on the article. She shared that she had once filed a report about Chase Taylor mocking a Somali student during lunch. She had been told to document it and move on. Another parent came forward with screenshots of an email exchange. A guidance counselor had expressed concern over racial tensions in the school. The response was a single line. "We don't want to inflame things unnecessarily." Miss Adler, the English teacher who had been removed from her committee after speaking up in the meeting, posted the interview on her social media page with one caption. "This isn't new. This is just finally visible." Zara saw the post. She didn't react. She had learned not to celebrate too early. Visibility was not the same as victory. But something had shifted. Students whispered differently now, some with admiration, others with resentment, but fewer with mockery. The superintendent scheduled a meeting. The school board issued a statement. An independent review was announced. Zara moved through the halls with the same steady steps. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She kept her shoulders straight, her head level, but the air around her had changed. It didn't press down anymore, it parted for her. In the classroom, teachers paused too long before calling her name. In the cafeteria, students sat quieter when she passed. She didn't ask for this power, but she knew what to do with it. Principal Langley continued documenting. He saved every article, every forwarded email, every time-stamped clip from the lunchroom cameras. He said little in meetings. He didn't need to. The truth was speaking loud enough. At the end of the week, Zara returned to his office. She placed her notebook on the desk, its pages thicker now. More names, more dates. More moments of silence that weren't innocent. Langley flipped through it. "They're still testing boundaries," he said. She nodded. "Anything new?" he asked. She hesitated. Then she told him about the girl in the hallway. The push. the warning glance. The teacher who saw it and turned away. Langley wrote it down on a yellow legal pad. This will be in the next report. You think they'll care? Some will, he said. The rest will care when the public does. She leaned back. I didn't mean to become a symbol, she said quietly. You didn't, he replied. You became a mirror. She didn't speak for a moment, then asked, What happens now? He closed the notebook and looked at her. Now we keep going. Until they can't look away anymore. That night, the school district's public relations team issued a press release about their commitment to student dignity and inclusion. It was full of carefully chosen phrases, measured regret. Future promises. Zara read it once. Then she closed her laptop and opened her notebook again. She wasn't done watching, and the world wasn't done listening. At first, it looked like nothing had changed. The walls of Meadow Ridge High still stood clean and tall. The banners above the entrance still preached excellence through community, and the morning bell still rang with the same mechanical indifference. But inside, something had shifted. It was in the way students paused when Zara Mitchell walked by, in the way teachers' voices tightened slightly when they spoke to her, in the way no one dared speak her name too loud, as if it had become sacred or dangerous. The air felt charged now. Not with threat, but with awareness. And awareness, Zara had learned, was power. Principal Victor Langley moved through the halls with the same calm he always carried, but those who looked closer saw something different in his stride. He was more deliberate now. He stopped to speak with teachers in private. He walked slower when passing the counseling office. He met more frequently behind closed doors, and the meetings lasted longer. He was no longer managing a school. He was preparing a case. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the trees outside, Zara found herself once again in his office. The room was quieter than usual. The blinds were closed. The folders on his desk were stacked higher than before. You think they're going to back down? She asked. Langley looked up, eyes tired but sharp. No, he said, but they're starting to reposition. She raised an eyebrow. They're not saying you're wrong, he explained. They're trying to say you're complicated. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. That same week, an anonymous message landed in Langley's inbox. It was forwarded from a staff thread, sent originally from a teacher's account. The language was coded, but the meaning was clear. Some of these girls come in here looking for trouble. They need structure, not sympathy. It was signed only with initials, but the context was obvious. The teacher who had ignored Chase's first shove in art class. The one who hadn't looked up when the braid hit the floor. Zara read the printout in silence, then let the paper drop. They're building a case against me, she said. Langley nodded. They've been building it since the day you walked in. Then what do we do now? He leaned forward. We wait for the cracks, and when they come, we drive the wedge. The wedge came sooner than expected. 2 days later, Reggie, a janitor who usually kept to himself, stopped Zara quietly in the hallway just as the bell rang. I saw what happened in the art room, he said, voice low. Zara blinked. Why didn't you say anything before? Reggie glanced down the hall. Because I've seen how this plays out. Not the scissors, the way they twisted. The way it eats people up. She nodded slowly. Would you speak up if someone asked you? He looked her in the eye. If the right person asked. Zara relayed the conversation to Langley. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just nodded once and murmured, "That's the beginning." Another crack appeared at a staff meeting. Miss Adler, still smarting from her removal from the committee, raised her hand during the equity segment. Why weren't any students interviewed before the district issued its public statement? Her voice was soft but clear. The room fell silent. No one answered. The next day, her name disappeared from the professional development schedule. Zara wrote that down too. She was no longer just documenting student behavior. She was mapping the entire structure, the patterns, the silence, the quiet retaliation. She watched as more students started to take notice. A boy in her literature class nodded to her after school. A girl in gym offered to be her partner without being asked. Nothing loud. Nothing public, but they were starting to shift. They weren't allies yet. But they were paying attention. Even some teachers began to hesitate. The ones who once looked through her now looked at her. Cautious, calculating, like they had realized the balance of power had begun to tilt. One afternoon, Langley called her in after hours. The building was nearly empty, the light outside fading into gold. "Lock the door," he said. She did. On his desk was another folder. "This was forwarded to me," he said. From an internal staff thread. Zara opened it. More emails. Discussions about recurring discipline issues. Mentions of students from less structured homes. Phrases like cultural disruption and low parental involvement. Not once was her name mentioned. But the message was clear. "They're preparing something," she said. Langley nodded. "They're not coming with scissors anymore. They're coming with policy." Zara looked up. Her voice was steady. "So what now?" Langley didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Now we prepare our case too." That night, she went home and opened her notebook. She didn't just write about students. She wrote about emails, about hallway conversations, about which teachers looked away and which ones watched too closely. The next morning, another small shift occurred. In the cafeteria, as she sat alone as always, a grape rolled across her table again. Then a napkin. Then a plastic fork. Zara didn't move. She looked up. She met Nolan Pierce's eyes. He looked away first. She stood, picked up her tray, and walked to the front office. The secretary said Langley was in a meeting. "I'll wait," Zara said. She stood in the hallway, silent, still. When he arrived, she handed him the notebook. "Open to the latest page." He did. He read silently. Then he looked up. "You mapped the blind spots." She nodded. "You said to make it undeniable." He smiled, faintly. Not triumph, but approval. "You've been listening." By the time the district's first findings were released, the walls of Meadow Ridge High were no longer strong enough to hold the story inside. The report came quietly through email. No press conference, no grand statement. Just a subject line that read, "Preliminary Review Update." There were 7 paragraphs, but only one truly mattered. "We have confirmed that multiple prior complaints involving the same group of students were not investigated appropriately or escalated through the proper channels. Corrective action will be taken." That single sentence hit like a lightning strike. Within hours, the video from the lunchroom was leaked to a student-run social media account. The grainy footage showed Zara sitting alone, unmoving, while food was tossed, while boys laughed, while one voice, Nolan's, clearly said, Why don't you smile? Then came the stare. That stare, captured in silence, said more than any shout ever could. The video spread fast. Reposts, duets, reactions. It was no longer just a local issue. And then, something no one expected happened. Other voices began to rise. A sophomore girl, shy but determined, posted a thread on her private account. She wrote that Kyle had harassed her during orientation, that she told a counselor, that she was told to be careful about making accusations. She posted screenshots. A former student, now in college, commented on the video. That's the same boy who followed me to my car after drama club. 3 times. Nothing was ever done. More posts followed, each story braided into the next, like the strands of Zara's own hair. What had once been isolated became undeniable. Inside the school, the atmosphere shifted again. Chase Taylor was withdrawn from the district by the end of the week. Liam Foster's parents filed for a transfer. Nolan Pierce remained, but he moved like someone carrying a shadow he could not shake. He didn't speak. He didn't joke. He didn't look Zara in the eye. He didn't have to. He already knew. On Thursday, Zara and Principal Langley were both invited to a closed hearing with the district's review committee. It was not a courtroom, just a narrow room with folding chairs, fluorescent lights, and walls the color of old paper. Zara didn't want to go. They'll pretend to listen, she said, and nothing will change. Langley didn't argue. He just offered her history. Sometimes they don't change because of the speech, he said. Sometimes they change because they run out of ways to lie. So she agreed. The room was full. Parents, teachers, board members, reporters with quiet cameras. Zara stood at the front. No podium, no note cards, just her voice. She didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't relive the pain. She told the truth about what happened and what happened before. When a board member asked, "Do you feel justice has been served?" she answered without pause. "I don't need justice to come quickly. I need it to come fully, and not just for me." There was a stillness in the room after that, one that stretched past discomfort into understanding. That afternoon, a letter of formal disciplinary action was issued. Chase Taylor, harassment. Liam Foster, targeted misconduct. Nolan Pierce, administrative negligence. The letter was not made public. But the silence that had once protected them no longer existed. Meadow Ridge High felt different now, not because the building had changed, but because the illusion had shattered. Teachers still taught. Bells still rang. But the way people moved through the space had shifted. Zara was no longer a question. She was an answer. Even those who still feared her presence no longer spoke with certainty. The assumption that she would stay quiet, that she would absorb, that she would vanish, had been broken. What remained was a single question. What would she do next? One afternoon, Principal Langley asked to see her. The message was handwritten this time, folded neatly, passed through a student assistant. She walked into his office with calm steps. She didn't carry her notebook. He gestured for her to sit. "I got a call this morning," he said. "From the superintendent." Zara listened. "They're issuing a public apology, in writing. And they're offering you the opportunity to speak at the press conference." She raised her eyebrows. "They think if I speak, it'll fix things?" "They think if you speak, it'll make them look like they care," Langley replied. She studied his face. "And what do you think?" I think this is yours now, he said. The story, the voice, the direction. You've already been in control longer than they realized, but speaking now makes it official. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the window. Rain streaked down the glass. Outside, students moved through the courtyard, umbrellas bobbing like quiet flags. Then she nodded. I'll speak. But that wasn't the conversation she was thinking about. There was one more. Austin had stayed silent through it all. He hadn't spoken to her since the incident. His friends were gone, his seat at the back of the cafeteria now always empty. She found him after school in the parking lot. He stood leaning against his car, earbuds in, head down. When she stepped into his shadow, he looked up. He flinched. I'm not here to fight, she said. He didn't respond. She stood in front of him. You ever think about why you did it? He blinked. Did what? She tilted her head. Cut my hair, said what you said, laughed when they did it. What was the point? He shifted, uncomfortable. It was just a joke. She nodded slowly. No? It was a decision. He looked down. I don't need an apology, she said. I just want you to understand something. He looked at her. Finally. You didn't break me, she said. You revealed yourself. And with that, she turned and walked away. The auditorium lights were dimmed, and the room was hushed with anticipation. Rows of chairs had been set up for press, school officials, and community leaders. Cameras lined the front, their red lights glowing steadily. Behind the curtain stood Zara Mitchell, silent and composed. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back into a simple bun. She didn't come to impress. She came to speak. Next to her stood Naomi Grant, the journalist who had first helped bring her story into the public eye. On the other side was a representative from the district communications team, visibly anxious. Only Principal Victor Langley appeared calm, his sleeves rolled up, his stance steady as always. The superintendent was first to the podium. She read from a prepared statement. Words like responsibility, equity, and commitment filled the room, each spoken with practiced care. Then Langley stepped forward. She didn't ask for cameras. She didn't ask for microphones, but she earned them, he said. Then he stepped aside. Zara took the stage. The sound of her shoes on the wood floor was the only noise as she approached the podium. She paused, glanced at the crowd, and took in the full room. Parents, teachers, students. Reporters, some with curiosity in their eyes, others with guilt. A few with quiet admiration. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. My name is Zara Mitchell, she began. No flashes, no applause. I didn't come here to talk about what happened to me. That part has already been documented. You've seen the footage. You've read the timelines. You've drawn your conclusions. She paused. Let the silence stretch just a second longer. I came here to tell you what it meant. She gripped the sides of the podium. It didn't mean I was violent. It didn't mean I was dangerous. It meant I was tired. Tired of being humiliated. Tired of pretending silence was strength. Tired of watching others get hurt while nothing changed. Her voice didn't crack. It stayed steady, strong. They cut my hair, she said, but they didn't break me. They laughed, but they didn't win. And when I stood up, I didn't stand just for myself. I stood for every student who's been told they were too much, too loud, too angry, too different. Zara looked down for a moment, gathering herself, then looked back out at the crowd. They didn't expect me to fight back. Not because they thought I couldn't, but because they thought I wouldn't be allowed to. They thought the system would protect them, and for a while it did. Until it didn't. The auditorium was so still that even the clicking of a pen in the back row sounded loud. "I don't want pity," she said. "I don't want to be your symbol. What I want is accountability that doesn't wait for headlines. What I want is safety that doesn't come with conditions. What I want is a school where dignity isn't something you earn by staying quiet, but something you're given because you are human." Another pause. This one longer, deeper. "I've been asked what I want now. What justice looks like," she breathed in. "I don't have just one answer, but I can tell you what I don't want. I don't want apologies with no action. I don't want promises that fade in a week. And I don't want to be the only one." She stepped back from the microphone. Not with flair, not with a bow, just one step. Quiet, certain. For a moment, there was nothing. Then one hand clapped, then another, then the room rose. Not with cheers, but with solemn, measured respect. Zara walked off stage past the cameras, past the spotlight, past the faces that had once looked through her. She was done being invisible. In the days that followed, the silence that once surrounded Meadow Ridge dissolved. The district updated its student dignity policies. Anonymous reporting channels were created. Teachers were required to undergo anti-bias training, not once, but ongoing. Langley was quietly commended for his leadership. He barely acknowledged it. He didn't need applause. His reward was in the record, in the evidence that could no longer be erased. Zara didn't change how she moved through the school. She arrived on time. She completed her work. She didn't seek attention, but attention followed her now with purpose. Students greeted her with nods. Some thanked her, others, especially the younger ones, simply watched her as if trying to understand where her strength came from. She knew it didn't come from shouting, it came from surviving without surrender. One afternoon, near the end of the semester, she sat in her usual lunch spot. This time, she wasn't alone. A younger girl hesitated near her table, tray in hand. Zara looked up. "You can sit here," she said. The girl smiled and joined her. They didn't need to speak. It was enough to share space that had once been denied. That evening, back home, her mother brewed tea without saying much. Then placed a warm cup in front of her. "We're proud," she said. Zara didn't cry. But the words stayed with her long after the tea turned cold. In her room, she opened the notebook one last time. She read through every page, every entry, every crack that had become a rupture. Then she closed it. She didn't throw it away. She placed it gently in a box, next to the braid she had once carried like a scar, not to forget, but to remember who she became after they tried to break her. She didn't need a monument. She had become one. Zara Mitchell's journey reminds us that true strength often lies not in noise or confrontation, but in quiet conviction and unwavering dignity. In a world where silence is too often mistaken for weakness, Zara chose to watch, to listen, and then to speak not just for herself, but for every person who has been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. For older generations who have seen decades of change, this story is a powerful reflection of the battles that continue quietly in hallways, workplaces, and communities. It reminds us that justice is not a moment, it is a process. And sometimes, the most powerful tool is not protest or force, but documentation, patience, and truth spoken plainly. Zara didn't change the system overnight, but she planted something that couldn't be ignored, and in doing so, she handed the microphone to those who thought they had none. In our own lives, whether we're raising a voice or making space for someone else's, we must remember, dignity is not something earned through silence. It is something we protect for ourselves and for each other. Because lasting change often begins with the courage to say, "This isn't right, and I won't let it stand."